my God, why have you forsaken me? This is the cry that today's liturgy has us repeat in the responsorial psalm, the only cry that Jesus makes from the cross in the gospel we have heard. Those words bring us to the very heart of Christ's passion, the culmination of the sufferings he endured for our salvation. Why have you abandoned me? The sufferings of Jesus were many, and whenever we listen to the account of the Passion, they pierce our hearts. There were sufferings of the body. We can think of the slaps and the beatings, the flogging and the crowning with thorns, the cruelty of the crucifixion. There were also sufferings of the soul, the betrayal of Judas, the denials of Peter, the condemnation of the religious authorities, the mockery of the guards, the jeering at the foot of the cross, the rejection of many, utter failure, the abandonment of the disciples. And yet, amid all these sorrows, Jesus remained certain of one thing, the closeness of the Father. Now, however, the unthinkable has taken place. Before dying, he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus who's abandoned. This is the most searing of all sufferings, the suffering of the Spirit. At his most tragic hour, Jesus experiences abandonment by God. Prior to that moment, he never called the Father by his generic name, God. To convey the impact of this, the Gospel also reports his words in Aramaic. These are the only words of Jesus from the cross that have come down to us in the original language. The event is terribly real. It's the abandonment of his Father, of God. We find it hard even to grasp what great suffering he embraced out of love for us. He sees the gates of heaven closed. He finds himself at the bitter age, the shipwreck of life, the collapse of every certainty. And he cries out, the why of whys. To you, God, why? My God, why have you forsaken me? In the Bible, the word abandon or forsake is powerful. We find it at moments of extreme pain. Love that fails or is rejected or betrayed, children who are rejected or aborted, situations of repudiation, the lot of widows and orphans, broken marriages, forms of social exclusion, injustice and oppression, the solitude of sickness. In a word, in the most drastic severing of the bonds that unite us to others, it's at that moment that they would use the word abandonment. Christ brought all of this to the cross upon his shoulders. He bore the sins of the world. And at the supreme moment, Jesus, the only begotten, beloved Son of the Father, expressed a situation completely alien to his very being, God's abandonment. And we can ask why it had to come to this, and there's only one answer. He did it for us. Brothers and sisters, today this is not a show. Each one of us, hearing the abandonment of Jesus, can ask or can say, for me, this abandonment is the price he paid for me. He became one of us to the very end. in order to be completely and definitively one with us. He experienced abandonment in order not to leave us prey to despair, so He would be able to stay at our side forever. He did this for me, for you, because whenever you or whoever feels themselves up against a wall, who feels lost in a blind alley, plunged into the abyss of abandonment, sucked into a whirlwind of so many whys that have no response, there might be hope. Him, for you, for me. It's not the end, because Jesus was there, and now He's with you. He who suffered abandonment in order to take up into His love every possible distance that we can feel. Many of us have fallen many times, and each one of us can say, in my failings, in my desolation, whenever I feel betrayed or I've betrayed others, when I feel cast aside or I've cast others out, when I feel abandoned or I've abandoned others, we can think that He was abandoned, and it's there that we will find Him. When I feel lost and confused, when I can't take it anymore, He is with me. He's there.
Nei mille tanti capricci
in the thousand
di perché e con tante perché senza risposta,
in all of the questions, the whys that we ask, He's there with me. That is how the Lord saves us from within our why. And it's there that He opens the horizon of hope. It does not disappoint. On the cross, even as He felt utter abandonment, Jesus refused to yield to despair. Instead, He prayed and He entrusted Himself. He cried out His why in the words of the psalm, and He entrusted Himself into the hands of the Father, even though He felt distant, and He feels that because He feels abandoned. In the hour of His abandonment, He entrusts Himself. Even more, at the hour of abandonment, He continued to love His disciples who abandoned Him, who left Him alone. And He forgave those who crucified Him. Here we see the abyss of our evil immersed in a greater love, with the result that our distance becomes communion. Brothers and sisters, a love like this, embracing us completely into the very end, the love of Jesus like this is capable of transforming our hard hearts into hearts of flesh. It's a love capable of mercy, tenderness, and compassion. This is God's style. Closeness, compassion, and tenderness. God is like that. Christ, in His abandonment, stirs us to seek Him and to love Him in those who are themselves abandoned. For in them we see not only those who are in need, but we see Jesus Himself. He's with them. Jesus, who is abandoned, the one who saved us by descending to the depths of our human condition. He's with every one of them, abandoned even to death. I'm thinking a few weeks ago about a man, the German man who died under the colonnade of St. Peter's, alone and abandoned.
È Gesù per ognuno di noi.
He's Jesus for every one of us.
Bisogno della nostra vicinanza.
There are so many who need our closeness, so many who are abandoned.
Anche io ho bisogno
And
che Gesù mi carezzi.
I too need that Jesus caresses me and draws near to me. And so that's why I need to go out and find Him in those who are in need.
Egli desidera che ci prendiamo cura dei fratelli e delle sorelle.
And this is why He wants us to care for our brothers and sisters who resemble Him the most,
Nell'atto estremo del dolore,
those experiencing extreme suffering
solitudine.
and solitude.
Non solo persone, ma oggi fratelli e sorelle.
Not
sono
only
tanti
today,
Cristi abbandonati.
there are many
Ci sono popoli
Christs who are
interi,
abandoned. There are entire
lasciati
peoples
a
who
se
are
stessi.
abandoned,
Ci sono
left
poveri che
alone.
vivono agli incroci delle nostre strade
The poor
e
who
neppure
live
non
on the
abbiamo il
crossroads of our
coraggio
streets.
di incrociare lo sguardo.
And we don't even have the courage to look at them.
Ci sono dei migranti
There are
conosciuti
migrants
volti, ma in numeri.
who are no longer faces but numbers, prisoners who are disowned,
Persone catalogate come
people
problema.
written off as problems.
Ma ci sono anche tanti Cristi.
There are countless
Ci sono
other
tanti Cristi abbandonati,
Christs,
invisibili, nascosti,
abandoned persons in our midst,
scartati con guanti
invisible, hidden, discarded with white gloves,
abbandonati,
unborn
anziani
children, the
lasciati
elderly who live alone,
anziani lasciati soli.
the elderly
Che può essere
who are left
papà,
alone. It could be
mamma,
your father, your mother, maybe your grandmother, your grandfather, abandoned in rest homes, the sick whom no one
disabili,
visits,
ignorati,
the disabled who are
giovani che
ignored,
sentono un grande
the
vuoto
young
dentro,
burdened
senza
by
che
great
abbiano
interior
ascoltato
emptiness,
il loro grido di
and no
dolore.
one listens to their cry of pain,
Un'altra strada del suicidio.
and they don't find any other way out than suicide.
Abbandonati di oggi,
Today's abandoned, the Christs of today.
e Gesù abbandonato ci chiede di avere occhi e
Jesus,
cuore
abandoned,
abbandonati.
asks us to open our eyes to
E per
those
noi,
who are
discepoli
abandoned. And for us,
dell'abbandonato,
as disciples of
nessuno
the
può essere
abandoned one,
marginato,
no
nessuno
man,
può
no
essere
one
lasciato a se
can be
stesso.
left
Perché
to him or
ricordiamo, le
herself.
persone rifiutate
Let us remember that the rejected and the
sono
excluded
icone viventi
are
di
living
Cristo.
icons of Christ.
Ci ricordano il suo
They
amore
remind us
folle,
of
il
His
suo abbandono che
crazy
ci salva
love,
da ogni solitudine
His mad
e
love, His
desolazione.
abandonment that delivers us from every form of loneliness and isolation.
Di saper amare
Today, let us
Gesù
implore this
abbandonato
grace to love Jesus
e di
who was
saper
abandoned,
amare Gesù
and to
in
love
ogni
Jesus
abbandonato,
in the
in ogni
abandoned,
abbandonato.
in every
Chiediamo la grazia di
one
saper
who's
vedere,
abandoned.
di saper
Let us ask for the
riconoscere il
grace
Signore che ancora
to
grida
see and
in loro.
acknowledge the Lord who continues to
Non
cry out in
permettiamo
them.
che la sua voce si perda
May we not
nel
allow His
silenzio
voice to go
assordante
unheard
dell'indifferenza.
or in the deafening
Non
silence
siamo
of
stati
indifference.
lasciati soli da Dio.
God has not left us
Prendiamoci
alone.
cura di chi viene
Let us
lasciato
care then
solo.
for those who feel alone and abandoned.
Allora, soltanto allora,
Then, and only
faremo i
then,
nostri desideri e i
will we be of
sentimenti
one mind and
di colui
heart
che per noi
with the one
sovraccò
who for our
se
sake
stesso,
emptied Himself.
totalmente per
He
noi.
completely emptied Himself for us. Our Holy Father's home.